So a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Nick Austin. I'm the Master of Campion Hall here in the University of Oxford, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Laudato Si Research Institute to this symposium on the politics of land insights from Asia. I can't see all of you, so I do invite you in the chat function just to introduce yourself to the group very briefly, say who you are, where you're from, and what your role is. That would be great. It's our hope during this symposium to bring the resources of religious and spiritual traditions, including the tradition of Catholic social thought and teaching, to some of the most challenging crises of our time. Over these 2 afternoons, we're going to be focusing on land rights, land governance, especially in a South Asia context. So the kind of questions we'll be looking at are what interests are encroaching upon the forests, the land, the waterways of indigenous peoples. What kind of government policies can be developed from a perspective of social justice that responds to the dispossession of land that these peoples are facing? We'll also be looking at what resources religious traditions can bring, including Pope Francis' latest encyclical Fratelli Tutti, to enable us to respond from a more holistic perspective to these multifaceted issues. We'll be bringing together academics and practitioners as well in order to contribute to our understanding and response to these crises. And in particular, we'll be focusing on an Indian context, working out what solidarity means as we attempt to respond to the very linked cry of the earth and cry of the poor. So once again, a very warm welcome. We're delighted that you've been able to join us today. And I now hand over to Dr. Carlos to give us a briefing and further orientation to the questions we'll be addressing. Thank you.
So welcome you all, Fratelli Tutti, brothers and sisters all. This is all about solidarity in action. It is no longer news that our world today is suffering, but it is always more revealing to know who is suffering, how they are suffering, and why. Because as Pope Francis invited us to reflect in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, we're all part of the same tree of life. Together we enjoy a shared bond: love, care, fraternity, solidarity, and hope. This idea is all springing to life in Fratelli Tutti in a call to action to care about others, to respond to a kind of fraternity that energizes us to care about all life. Fratelli Tutti invites us to become, in a way, political, social, ecological, good Samaritans in practice. This is key to understand because the challenge of our day is that the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor are rising from all over the world. And it is perhaps too easy to become tone deaf on the suffering cries of the vulnerable and the excluded, given how overwhelmed we can become with multiple overlapping crises ranging from climate change to COVID-19, and how we often normalize inequality and injustice in all its forms. So take, for instance, some recent data about injustice in our world related to land, and how examining the situation of the Adivasis in India could help us illuminate some questions and answers to this. So in 2019, Global Witness recorded globally 212 murdered land and environmental defenders. It was by far the deadliest year on record for people defending their homes, the forests, the rivers against climate destructive industries. But it was not a glitch in the system, it was a trend, because on average 4 land environmental defenders have been killed every week since December 2015, the month the Paris Climate Agreement was created. So countless more have been silenced as well by violent attacks, arrests, death threats, sexual violence, or lawsuits. the cries and suffering of the Adivasi people in indigenous tribal and forest dwelling communities in India has become an ongoing dark example of systemic injustice, entangled in socio-ecological, economic, political and cultural practices. According to the 2011 census, this tribal people number 104 million, almost 9% of the country's then 1.2 billion in population of India. It is the largest indigenous population in any country in the world, occupying 22% of India's geographical terrain. However, their voices have been systematically excluded from the realms of power in India. In 2019, the Adivasi people suffered a twin threat. The first one was the country's new citizenship laws. The second one, a proposed amendment to the Indian Forest Act, which put the legal rights and protections at risk. The new citizenship law threatened to make forest communities stateless, and many lack the documents to prove their citizenship. This proposed legislation that would have been seen millions of tribal and forest dwellers evicted and given officials the power to shoot people in the forest with virtual impunity was scrapped after international outcry. But even more still needs to be done to keep stewards of India's forests safe. So how can we all wrap this up for this conference? Well, injustices like this have many people have made many people stand up around the world in solidarity with the Adivasi tribal people, and those in similar situations in other parts of the world, like the Amazon region and the Congo basin, in support of the vulnerable. But let me tell you one example, which is we're very familiar in our research institute, is that of a Catholic Jesuit priest, the Father Stan Swami. For decades, he has given his life to help the Adivasi people in their socio-ecological struggles. But now, a frail 83-year-old, he has become the oldest person to be accused of terrorism in India. He's actually currently incarcerated in a Mumbai jail. His crime, well, Father Swami took a public role in protesting corporate mining interests that were seeking to displace India's indigenous and Adivasi people from their land in the eastern state of Jharkhand. So in a true act of courageous love, in a Fratelli Tutti way, Father Swami, the Adivasi people, and the ongoing global solidarity to stop the suffering reminds us that we're all connected. But also in a true Laudato Si way, where Pope Francis invited us to see how life and our ecosystems and our socioeconomic and political structures are all interconnected. The politics of land in India, through the lenses of the Adivasi people, obliges us to understand more in-depth questions like what sort of interests are encroaching our indigenous people's lands, forests, and waterways? How can we recognize the rights of indigenous people around the globe, ensuring that they were respected not merely on paper, but also in practice? What concrete contribution can Catholic social teaching make to these issues, as expressed through the recent papal encyclical Fratelli Tutti? So to explore these burning questions, I'm pleased to hand over the moderation of this dialogue to Dr. Séverine Deneulin, who is our LSRI's International Development Director, and who will lead the next part of this conversation on the politics of land in India with our guests. Many thanks.